What is up, everybody, and welcome to Knifecast Episode 7. In today's episode, we are going to talk about the high-end market. We're going to try to review everything that we know about it and give you guys some really important details. So I don't believe we have anything to recap from the last episode. So real quick, before we jump in, we'll go around the table and see what everybody's been carrying or has picked up recently. Josh, what you got going on?
So today I got off work a little early. I didn't take anything to work with me today because I forgot. I was up at 2 a.m. But when I got home and I did some errands around the house and then ran some errands outside, and I had the sigil with me, the Derek Monroe sigil.
Isn't it sigil?
Sigil, yeah. Sigil? I have like a catch in my throat. I can't freaking talk. I'm already starting out mispronouncing stuff.
That's all right.
But I wouldn't be me without saying the words completely wrong.
Nice.
But this thing is not to be confused with the Microtech. It is on a whole new level.
It looks awesome, man.
Yeah, it looks just like the Microtech version, but I mean the fit and finish is bar none some of the best I've ever seen.
Oh yeah. I'll have to check out his stuff. I don't know enough about his work. That's cool.
Frank, what you got?
I was carrying my Koenig Arius today. I absolutely love that knife. It's just perfect. The right size for me. The blade is just ideal. The action is incredible. And he's really come a long way with it. So I'm really excited. Actually, I'm going to be getting a new one of those sometime, hopefully at the Blade Show, but maybe shortly after if that doesn't work. In terms of new acquisitions, thanks to you, Tyler, and your enthusiasm for J.D. Vandeventer's work, I have he confirmed with me today that my full-size gold should be ready at the Blade Show as well. So that's awesome.
There you go, boy.
Yeah, man.
It's got Mokume, right?
A flat Mokume, pivot collars, bronze lightning strike carbon fiber handles without the fluting, and then like color match titanium frames, and then a Mokume backspacer. He said he had to work some magic for the Mokume backspacer, but it should work.
That's going to be spectacular.
Yeah, it should
Sick.
be awesome. Yeah, it'll be great. Ceramic bearings and all that stuff. It's going to be great.
The gold is a sweet model, man. You're going to love it.
Yeah, I just finished making a video for the small gold, the mini gold, and he liked it, so that was reassuring.
Sweet. You mean JD liked the video?
Yeah, I gave him a link, an unlisted link, so he could check it out. I try to do that to make sure I don't have any like glaring errors. I had a couple of mistakes, but nothing too crazy. But yeah, he appreciated that.
Cool, man. Sweet.
Yeah. How about you, man?
Well, I've been committing like knife treason lately. I've been buying like tops and spinners and pens and a lighter. It's getting pretty out of hand.
Some like a trendy lighter with like gears on it and stuff, a steampunk lighter.
That's one of those French ones. It's a fancy French lighter.
Hey man, that's okay. That's all right.
No, it is definitely
branch out
for sure.
The one I just picked up is from Japan.
Oh, it's not one of those.
It's not the ST DeBond or the Colibri that you're used to. I got it off Urban EDC Supply, which has great customer service, by the way. Quick shout out to them. But yeah, I talked about the most recent knife I bought last time, which was that Thorburn. I did win an Andre Van Heerden M44 in a raffle, which was nice to check out, but I sold it yesterday. Somebody wanted it, and I wasn't going to keep it. But yeah, I got some new pens. Lots of steel flame stuff. Been kind of on a steel flame kick. It's kind of not good.
Steel flame is just like a muddy sinkhole right there. You got to be careful.
It's fucking ridiculous, man. Yeah. It really is. And picked up some Rotoblade stuff and some billet spin stuff. And I'm actually really excited. The one thing I do want to mention, this is dragging on, but the one thing I do want to mention is this thing called, the brand is called Pocket Lore, and the model is called the Nautical. You guys can go Google it. I don't think really anybody knows what it is, and there's maybe less than 50 of them in the world, less than 100. They've only done one run, so it can't have been that many. And the people who have been selling them on the secondary market have been asking for double or more than double what the retail price was, which is unfortunate. But I managed to haggle with a Norwegian for a few days and score one for a much more reasonable valuation. So I'm very excited. It's going to be a while. It's on its way from Norway, but that's going to be a really special piece because people don't have
What is it exactly?
So it's a ring spinner similar to like the steel flame ring spins. It's in the shape of a coin, like it's like a circle. The outer ring is like, how do I describe it? So like in a normal spinner, you've got like the buttons, and then, there's like arms that come away from the center mass where the buttons are. This has like the buttons, instead of being like small and just in the center, are like big $50. They're like big coins. And then the actual part that you spin is just like a ring around the coins. And then if you take the coins off, then it's like a ring spin. And the steel flame slugs actually are compatible. They fit in the Nautical. So I'm super excited because it totally is compatible with my collection, and nobody's going to have one. And I love that.
Cool.
But yeah, that's pretty much it. So let's see. We're going to go ahead and jump into talking about the high-end market. I believe Frank is up first, and he's going to give us sort of a bit of an overview of all the different avenues and nooks and crannies of where and how the market exists. Frank, take it away.
I appreciate it. The way I wanted to sort of direct my discussion today was about how I sort of navigate the high-end knife market. And that really means custom knives and my experience so far. Now, there are guys out there that may listen to this that have been doing it for years and years and know a whole lot more than I do. But I've been in it for a little while now and thought I'd share some of my insight. Basically, before you can get a high-end knife, you have to understand how to navigate the market. And really, the way to do that today is on the internet. And I find that there are maybe three main ways to sort of find information, maybe four ways to find information out there. Instagram, I will say, is the number one way to do this. If you are not on Instagram, you're probably not listening to this because this is pretty much the only place we advertise this podcast. Instagram is a treasure trove because it's a picture-based social media platform, and a lot of high-end knife makers use this to show off their work, to show work in progress, and then to sell their knives. They will advertise when and where and how they're going to sell it, and when their books might open or when the sales will be or what knives they're bringing to what shows. And we'll get into that a little bit. But if you want to get a high-end knife and you are not on Instagram, you're making a huge mistake. That is, I think, probably the strongest overall place to find what you're looking for. Just after that, I would say places like Reddit and other forum sites. Reddit is a lot stronger because it's a bigger community, but some targeted forum sites like Blade Forums or the USN, the Usual Suspects Network, are a couple of forum sites where if you're a member and you sort of go through all the pages and everything that everyone has explained, there's an encyclopedia of information out there about different makers, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and things like that. So doing the background research, looking at these things is critical to really getting your way into the high-end market. And probably the last place I would recommend going is directly to a maker's site. The reason I say that is that a lot of custom knife makers have websites, but it seems like maybe so many of them, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, that they seem like they were built in like 1996 on AOL or
They ain't
something,
touched
and they're
them
just
things in a
not really like
decade. Yeah.
they're not up to date. They have old pictures. Now, some makers do a better job than others, but I feel like, maybe there's even an old telephone number. It's not the most reliable way. So, using these other avenues, I think, are the best ways to navigate through the high end market. Do you guys have any other like suggestions, places to look for information or maker information or something?
Well, what I will say is that you're right, and Reddit is definitely a great community. But as an avid redditor, I will say if you're just looking to buy things and you are mainly in the high end market, USN is easily the place to be. I mean, Blade Forums has a lot of good stuff, but what I found in practice is that probably 60 to 80% of what shows up on Blade Forums is a repost of something that's already on USN.
Yeah.
And so I think that if you want to have really great opportunities to buy great stuff at a reasonable price, USN is a good spot. And then you didn't mention Facebook.
I didn't know.
I hate Facebook.
I hate
as a
Facebook.
website.
That's why I try not to get on
Make
there,
it
but there is a
3.
strong community there as well.
Yeah, these groups.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So I hate it. I think it's a terrible website. I think it's a terrible platform. I think it's a terrible company. I don't use my personal Facebook at all. I it's maybe once a year, I'll log in for whatever reason, and I see I have a message from a family member. I say hi back. That's about it. But I found that these groups, these highly targeted groups, right, like the Tybalt Marketplace, the Billet Spin Marketplace, the Pocket Lore Marketplace, right? These are places where you're most likely to get the thing that you're specifically after. So in terms of browsing, I think it's the worst place because it is so targeted. You have to know where to go. You have to request an invite. You have to answer questions to get in, right? If you are looking for a very specific item, it's almost worth it to just suck it up and go only to that group.
That is true. Certain makers, I'll say a couple of guys, Rob Carter and even Edison Barajas, the Shark Knife Co. They do a whole lot of stuff in their Facebook groups. They do some on Instagram and stuff, but they're more active in Facebook. So I should have included that originally, but
personally,
definitely a place to go. But again, mixing your personal Facebook with knives is just a weird thing.
yeah, personally, I hate Facebook, and I hate that people like Rob Carter only post stuff for sale on Facebook mainly. He doesn't post anything for sale on Instagram. I started out on Reddit, and then as I got more and more into the high end market, I started coming up more and more on Instagram, and it's really like I'd say 90% of my time is spent when I'm searching for knives is on Instagram. That's where it's all been focused at. Yeah.
I'd say that's the most concentrated group of like serious,
I think
the
it's
high
the
end
biggest community. I really believe that's the biggest pool of high end knife collectors and makers.
In terms of discovery, it's easily the best place to be. 100%.
Yeah. And then, using that sort of as a segue that Instagram is probably the best. After you've sort of navigated where you want to go, you want to think about contacting somebody, in order to, I don't know, expand your knowledge or order a knife. And oftentimes Instagram is the best way to do that. That's really how I connected with you two guys, because it has a built-in messaging feature where you can like share the posts, save the pictures, repost stuff, tag people, link people. So it's a great system for sort of finding what you want to find and finding people who have experience with these things, because you can see it on their page that this guy has a Koenig Arius. He could tell me if it's good or not, or whatever you want to say. Some of these guys like to be contacted by email or telephone, and this is really up to the makers themselves. Again, once you've sort of browsed the information on their Instagram or on the forums or wherever, or on their website, you can find out how they like to be contacted. There are a couple of guys out there that want to be called on the telephone.
Yeah,
seriously.
John Gray, he's one.
Yeah, he just said, call me. And so the last point is just don't be afraid to contact a maker. I think Tyler here was also enthusiastic about this point, because one of the biggest hesitations is that we treat knife makers almost like celebrities sometimes, but really they're guys trying to make a product to sell to you. So if you're interested and capable of buying one of their knives, don't hesitate to contact them. Obviously, be friendly, and we'll get into that a little bit. But don't be afraid to get in touch with one of the makers if you really want one. So, once you decide that you want to get in touch with somebody, you want a custom knife, you have to keep these things in mind. Some of these are really important points. And I think number one is that money talks and bullshit walks. I'm just going to say it because money is the end all be all here. Let's be honest. These guys are making a product to sell. If you want it, you need to come to them. You need to have your money in order, and you need to be responsible about it. You can't, send Peter Resenti a message and say, "I'll give you $100 for your custom knife." You'll get burned, and they'll never talk to you again. You need to do your research. You need to not lowball anybody. You need to not screw around. And just when they say, "I have this knife that'll be $1,500," you say, "I just sent you the money. It's already done." That's how to get something
don't
done.
haggle. That's bad.
Don't haggle. Don't haggle. The next thing I was saying
Wait,
is
people do that?
I mean, I'm just saying that perceivably or conceivably somebody could be doing this. I'm not saying that people do,
True.
but when you see something on Instagram and it says this is for sale, you want to just say, "I have the money, here it is." Don't say, "Can I pay you in $200 installments?" If you're like that, don't ask. Just don't do it, because somebody else is going to come through with a lot more money. There is always someone who has more money than you do. There are freaking Arab sheikhs that are on this that we don't really know about. There is actually one of those guys burning through some knives right now, and it's out of control. But the next sort of point that I wanted to have with regards to that is choose your maker wisely. So if you're going to ask for a custom knife, you want to have a vision of what you want. You need to know what knife it is. You need to know about that maker. You need to research their capabilities. So you don't want to be asking somebody to give you a green electroanodized knife if they only do plain titanium or flame anodized, because that's not within their capabilities. You don't want to ask somebody to make you a mammoth flipper when they mammoth molar scales when they only work with carbon fiber or something like that. So you just need to know what to ask for. Now, sometimes you can ask for things off the menu. That's always a tactic I like to use.
I was going to say, I wanted to interrupt you because I was like, well,
I guess that's what
I mean, it doesn't hurt to
sort of a
ask.
bad example. What I mean to say is just understand what they're capable of building. You don't always want to ask like a guy who makes fixed blades to build you a balisong. These kinds of things. That's kind of what I mean.
Sure.
Don't
Okay.
ask them to do something that's out of the realm of possibilities for what they
Yeah, a
actually
funny
do.
example. Real quick.
Mhm.
A funny example would be like Ian
problem.
of CMF Metalworks. We've talked about him. He's been on the show. He makes some handmade. Don't contact him and tell him, "Hey, can you CNC 3D mill CNC the handle or the blade for me?" That's the first thing I
Right.
thought of, because he makes handmade knives on a bandsaw. He doesn't have a CNC.
Right. So after you sort of researched what they can do, figured out their prices, figured out how to contact them, you need to have a very specific plan in mind. I would recommend coming to a knife maker with a very specific build in your mind. You should just make it very clear and very concise. Contact the maker by their preferred method. Maybe use some of their other work as references. Say, "Hi, I'm Frank. I noticed your work. I saw this knife, and I thought that maybe I would love to get one with X, Y, and Z spec. What do you think?" Be very polite, be very specific, but be very concise. These guys don't always want to get a phone book, of 20 pages, of "I saw this and that," and just come at them with a clear sort of plan. And oftentimes they'll respond the best to that and say, "Okay, I can do that in 6 months, and we'll make it happen." Another thing to keep in mind is if you have this plan and you've done all this work and then you send them that message and they don't respond immediately, don't get mad, because sometimes they won't respond quickly. It might take them 2 hours, 12 hours, 48 hours. If it takes them longer than, say a week, you can always try again to politely say hello. But sometimes it's hard to reach these guys. So just keep trying and keep being polite about it. And eventually, I think that somebody will pay attention. What's been your guys' experience there?
I think it just comes down to the personality of the fucking guy,
Yeah.
right? Like, and you also got to have respect for what these people ask for. So, like Michael Gavick, for example, clearly states in his Instagram bio that he does not want you to DM him. You can send him an email, and if you send him an email, he'll get back to you that day, and he'll be very easy to work with. But if you DM him, he will never speak to you.
Yeah, it's
That's a good point.
So, yeah, you just gotta, yeah. Different makers are more communicative than others, and the other aspect of it is some people are just so into the knife that they'll put up with anything. I'm a little bit different. If you're a maker who is willing to work with me and willing to hash things out and have a conversation, those makers have thousands of my dollars right now. You know what I mean? So they
One
earn it.
point
In
I
that
would like to
sense.
make is think of it as more of a business proposal, or go into it like a professional mindset. Don't be like you were saying, Frank. Don't just write, "Hey, yo, what's up? Can you make me a knife?" or something stupid. You want to be.
Oh, that shit is dope. Can you
I
make
just saw
me?
you just posted that
Yeah.
knife. How much? I want it right now. I give you $500. No, don't do that. Be polite, be kind, use the same words you would use maybe in a business email, and always be respectful of that person's time.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. Um, Once you sort of get your foot in the door with a maker, I recommend trying to stay in very regular contact with that person, whether it's once a week or once a day. You'll sort of have to play that by ear depending on how friendly they are with you. But if you want your knife to get made, stay in contact with that person, be polite, and it'll get done eventually. If you say to somebody, "Will you build me this?" and then you never message them again, it may never get built. Some people can languish for years and not get something built just because they're not being proactive about it. Um, direct messaging or asking a maker is not the only way to get a custom knife. Not all makers, in fact, most makers, especially at the highest end, don't really take orders in that way. And if they do, it's to an extremely select few people. So sometimes you have to get these knives in different ways. Some makers, instead of directly taking orders at any given moment, open up a set of books, they call it, and you basically put your name on a list and they build the knife over a set period of time. We just saw Jason Guthrie opened his scout books and he got a bunch of people, and then he closed them a few minutes later because now he's got 100 people on his list who want a knife, and he'll build that over the next year or so, and eventually those people will get their knives. Other ways, people do lotteries, they do auctions. People sell them on Instagram and Facebook all the time. And then there's a new thing that's coming around. It's maybe not super new, but the concept of maker's choice. I think Ferrum Forge has been doing this a lot. The Grimsmo brothers are obviously doing this a lot, and now some guys like Craig Brown are moving to this sort of a system where
Michael Gavick for all of his
Gavco.
ever making
Michael
ever
Gavick
time.
always. They basically the makers will build a knife that they like to their spec, and then they will make it available to the community. So it will be unique, but it may not necessarily be the one you would build, but it's still special.
I like that.
I do
I'll just
too.
say
I think that makers often make way better looking and prettier designs than the customer. The customer is not always right in terms of taste on these things.
Yeah, that's a point that I'm going to make.
This is
later.
evidenced by my brown servo with the ridiculous skull and spine on it.
But you enjoy
that's
that.
just ridiculous.
So that's why.
I do too. I do, but money can't buy taste, and so somebody probably thinks it's awful.
Well, the funny thing is that Rask was a maker's choice. The Rask that I loaned you, that was a maker's choice.
Oh man, I really like them. But see that's it. They made it a clean, nice looking design that's widely appealing, but also very unique. So I do like that too.
It was something I didn't enjoy at first, but it grew on me, and it's very unique. And that's some of the perks of Maker's Choice. You get they like to experiment, right? And they might try something different on a Maker's Choice knife than they ever would any other way.
Yeah, absolutely. It does give them the freedom to not be pressured by deadlines or uh, needy clients or people that change their minds a lot. If any custom knife makers are listening to this and you've built me a knife, you know that I change my mind about 38 times before the knife gets finished, and it does take that variability out of it for sure. Uh, okay, so now you have your knife. Finally, one way or the other, you sent your message. It got through. They were nice to you. You spec'd out exactly what you wanted. It's 6 months later, and they just shipped it to you, and you just got it. You just opened the box. Okay, so now what do you do? It's the same thing as in buying any other product. You want to make sure that there are no obvious immediate defects. Sometimes these handmade knives, they're not made in a mass production facility and they haven't been engineered always in the same way. So there may be some small issues. If there are, it is totally appropriate to contact the maker immediately and say, hey man, I feel like this is not so perfect, or this isn't what we talked about, or why is it this way? And sometimes they will have a reason for it. Sometimes they won't, and often they will allow you to send it back to improve whatever the flaw is that you see. I have had I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 custom knives come to me, and there were some small issues, and I sent them right back to the maker, and they fixed it and sent it back to me in a couple of days. So it's not something people should be afraid of.
Can I? Yeah, can I just say though, because like obviously that's happened to me 5 or so times as well, and I just want to raise my hand and say, is anybody else suspicious that they're, I don't know, trying to get away with it? Like they know, because as soon as you're like, hey, this has this flaw that's obvious, they're like, cool, send it back. And then they spend the 2 hours and they fix it and they send it back. But why? Why doesn't it just go out right the first time? They know what they're doing.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to say. I think that what's interesting to me, what I've noticed is that just because somebody builds a knife actually doesn't necessarily mean that he's anywhere close to the kind of knife guy that you or I or Josh are. We look at knives and have a perception of knives, especially these folding knives, that's on a very different level. Say, for instance, I keep coming back to Craig Brown because I talk to him a lot, but the only the only knife that he owns is a Koenig Arius, and he didn't have that before he started making any knives. And that is true across a lot of these makers. They don't have 40 knives in their collection. They make these knives, and so sometimes I feel like they don't actually know some of these smaller things, especially the newer makers. They don't know these sort of smaller things that people are really looking at.
So
on these
there's
knives.
a saying that I don't know if you guys have heard this or not, but it's the cobbler's children have no shoes. It just means that a
Mm.
cobbler is somebody that makes shoes. For those that don't know, it just means that this
It's not
person.
a dessert.
Well, there is a peach cobbler. No, a
I thought it was
cobbler.
a yeah.
There's. I don't even know if there's cobblers anymore in the world. I don't. I don't. It's an old saying.
Yeah, there
Okay.
are. There
I don't
totally
know.
are.
There
Probably
are.
like some
There are.
fancy shoes. See, I don't own fancy
Yes.
shoes because I spend all my money on knives. But like these guys, like you
Correct.
said, they don't have their knives. They don't own any other knives. They build the knives, and just to compound on that, is some of these guys. Absolutely, I think they're probably doing it on purpose. Some of these guys, I think maybe their workload is a little bit too much and they're just trying to push knives out as fast as possible. And then some of them generally just didn't catch it. We're all human. We all make mistakes and it slipped out the door. I can't just generally say either one of those categories blankets the entire makers out there that do this. I think each case is a little different, but I know of people exactly like you said that when I showed them an issue, they're like, "Oh yeah, okay, send it back. I'll get it. I know what's wrong." And I've had people, same thing. It's like, oh man, are you serious? Yeah. And I show them a video of it. It's like, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't catch that. Send it back to me. So every case is a little different.
Yeah, absolutely. Good points. Um, so let's see. So say that there was a small issue where there wasn't, but now you have the knife back and the knife is perfect. Well, now it's time to enjoy the hell out of that knife. Make sure that this is sort of a thing that people can do, not to overbuy your carry or your purpose of the knife. It's sort of a vague, not clear thing for what I'm saying, but what I'm trying to say is if you want a knife that is going to be your ideal EDC knife, maybe you shouldn't get it with the dragon skin blade and the zirconium clip. That may just not be perfect. So definitely think about what the purpose is of the knife. If you want a showpiece, go for that beautiful piece. If you want to carry it, keep these things in mind, because these makers will build you whatever you want sometimes, but they may not. It may not end up being the ideal version of that knife. So think about that long and hard. And once you have it and you like it, make it your knife. Carry it, use it. I just say use it, carry it, flip it. Just don't worry about it because it's a thing. There's always going to be another knife. Just use it. I don't think there's a single knife in the world, at least in the sort of the range that I'm talking about, that shouldn't be carried and used and enjoyed. And then once you've got it and you're using it and you're carrying it, take pictures of it, put it on Instagram, and share it with everybody. And then foster the relationships that you built during this process. Keep talking to those guys. They may help you get in with another maker. They may, see you at a show and then introduce you to somebody. If you talk to somebody else, introduce them to the other makers, make connections. I think I'm having a lot of fun right now making some connections with different people, and it's creating some interesting opportunities. So that's sort of how I navigate the high-end knife market right now, and some of my recommendations for how to go about it the right way and to get what you want. I realize I have a certain advantage with my YouTube channel and all that stuff, but I think if anyone follows sort of these rules, I don't think that you'll have any trouble getting what you want out of the custom
You
knife
made a
market.
really good point about the don't overbuy for
True
your
that.
purpose. Like, that's something I didn't even think about. But of course, if you want like a EDC knife, a daily driver, and you tell the maker you want like a zirconium clip, and when you get it, you find out zirconium sucks for a clip material, and you can't get it in your pants, don't bitch at the maker because he's just doing what you asked him to do. That's a really good point. I don't think
Right.
people think about that as much, because when you give somebody the free will to just do whatever they want to that knife, they're gonna sometimes do exactly what you said. They're gonna over exaggerate what they need for the purpose. So yeah, going in there and knowing
Yeah.
what you want, that's important.
Well, cool. That's basically all
True
I had
that.
to say about the high end market. That's what I wanted to communicate during this cast here. So maybe I'll transition here to one of you guys.
Yeah. So, are you a fucking psychopath like me? Anal to the ends of the earth? Don't order custom knives.
Do not get into custom
Okay.
knives.
It's not. No. It's not about not getting into them at all. It's about not ordering them. So, over the last year or so, this is the problem that I've run into. I see a knife and I fall in love with it and I want something similar. And so I reach out to the maker and I say, I want to build this knife with this configuration. And they say, that sounds great. So I wait my turn and they buy all the materials and they send me pictures. And I'm like, that looks good, man. Put it together. And then they assemble it. And then they show me a video. And it's not what I want. So why is it not what I want? Well, like I said, I'm super anal. And so if you find yourself being a person similar to me, I urge you to buy knives that are already made. Because, for example, Timascus, it's a fluid material, right? There's no rhyme or reason to the pattern, really. To the details of the pattern anyway, right?
Yeah, the details, definitely. That's a good point.
Yeah. So, and if you have a big chunk of Timascus and you have a pattern that's not super developed, like boomerang, right, where it's pretty consistent, but you just have sort of a bubbly pattern, the section that you choose of that will make a different looking bolster than a different section from the same piece. So if in my head I have the bolster being a certain section of a certain piece of Timascus, whatever it was that I saw that inspired the build, that's what I'm looking for. And if I ask for that, a lot of makers tell me I'm being too crazy and they try to back away, or too picky, or what have you. Or you just don't ask, and then when you get the knife, it's just not what you had in mind. So there's that aspect of it, of like pattern matching, right? And then color matching. So, if I see liners that are particular purple that I'm really interested in, so I order purple liners, right, from somebody else. And then they come and they're a different shade because they use a different voltage, or they had a different type of titanium, or they did it for, with a different bath or whatever. That can be really frustrating.
I can attest to that specific scenario. I bought a Olamic Rainmaker a long time ago, and
those were actually, I think that was my first video I ever saw of you before I knew who you were.
Oh, really? Yeah. That was a beautiful knife, but I initially ordered it. I wanted them to match the color of the frames it had Mokume on it, and I ordered it gold, and it didn't match the right way as I was hoping in my head. And so that's totally what I'm understanding. I'm totally getting that vibe here.
Yeah. And then all of that can kind of coalesce into the point that for me, and I'm sure for other people, and Frank, you sort of touched on this previously, is that like I'm bad at foreseeing the design I think I want in my head. So a really good example of this, sort of my ultimate catastrophe, was this Larevo Lattice that I have. So I want to be very clear before I go into this that Jason did everything I asked him to do, right? Like, this was not the result of poor workmanship or...
I remember these conversations you and I were having as this was being built. You literally told me that he did everything I told him to do, and I still don't like it.
And I hate it. Because
and that's exactly your words. I hate it.
Now, which one are we talking about?
This is the
here?
latter.
The white Juma one?
Yes, the Juma one.
With the bacon. Yeah.
So in my head, all of this made sense. And then when I got it, when he finished it, it looked like a clown knife. Because all I said was, I really like purple liners, so I want purple liners. I really like bacon Damascus, so I want bacon Damascus. I really like Timascus, so I want Timascus bolsters. I really like zirconium, so I want zirconium collars. I really like white Juma, so I want white Juma scales.
Oh my God. Dude.
And hey, I want all my hardware, the titanium hardware, the pivot and the screws, to match the colors in the Timascus, right? So I want pink and purple. So yeah, I get it. It looks like shit, right? Like, so it's got a zirconium back.
You said it.
Yeah, it's got a zirconium backspace, so it looks dope. The liners just didn't turn out the way I wanted them to. Just a different type of titanium or something than I was used to. They were very like magenta, like pink almost, which was just like way too bright of a color for this type of knife. The zirconium pivot collars you can't see because the pivot and the Timascus match and they're black, so they just blend in. The pivot is ugly. Again, it's literally exactly what I asked for, and it looks terrible. And and
at least you have enough like humility to say that.
It's totally my fault. And even the blade, like, he was asking me, he like showed me a picture where he had lined his template for the blade up on the piece of Damascus to show me like where the lines were going to be. And I was like, yeah, looks great. And then he did it. And I was like, I didn't, you know what I mean? And like, I just said yes. And like, because I was like, yeah, it looks good. But so I get this thing and it's just not what I wanted. So since then, I've bought a whole new Steve Kelly pivot, and that's out right now being re-anodized, like a solid purple. I think that'll look better. I sent the bolsters out to Adam Purvis, and he reflamed them for me, and they look great now. And the liners, when I got the knife originally, I sent it back to Jason and had Jason redo the liners from the pink to a dark blue. And now the knife looks amazing, but it like took me seeing it to realize how bad I was. And the same thing happened with my JD Van Deventer Gold. I told him what I wanted. I got it. It just wasn't what I wanted. I had to send it out for modifications and this and that. And I find that the knives, I'm looking right now at my collection, and the 3 knives that I love the most, the 4 knives, I guess, that I love the most are all knives that I did not custom order. They're all knives that I just was like, I like that one, and I threw my money at it. And so I guess the point that I'm trying to make is like, this is a point that I've gotten to in collecting. And I basically message makers now and say, hey, if anybody backs out of an order, if you could hit me up, that'd be great. Like, I'm really interested in a knife, but I don't want to order one. And everybody kind of like looks at me funny, but it is what it is. That's what I have to do at this point. So, good ways to do that. Obviously, dealers, shows, having good relationships with makers. I do have makers that hit me up literally and are just like, I built this. Do you want? Right. And I'm like, yeah.
That's a dangerous.
Right. So, it's super dangerous.
Yeah.
It's
like,
super
do you want
dangerous.
it? Yeah. No. Yeah. Yeah, I do.
Yeah, Josh, you might have had that issue with a certain
no, with more
Mr.
than one.
Gavick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like 3 or 4 knives I bought from makers reaching out to me and saying, "Hey, do you like this? Yeah. You want to buy it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Money's already in your PayPal account, buddy."
Yeah, there you go.
Ian just did that to me this week.
He did it to me too.
He offered me that prototype.
Yeah, he offered me that proto. I was like, man, I got to go to Blade Show, and I'm like way too deep.
See,
right
I'm the
now.
most gullible one. I bought
It's
one.
bad.
I have prototype
you did buy
number
one. You
3,
told
and
me
it's
that.
going to be
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, I believe it. It looks like a beautiful knife, but not right now.
I actually bought Hyperdrive Damascus for it. I'm excited about that.
Wow.
See, you two are getting into the kind of shit, man. That's what I'm talking about. When you're buying your own materials, that's like you're a collector.
So this is when you go to ludicrous speed. All right, like I feel like I have just evolved into a different sort of knife orderer right now, and not a lot of people are willing to do this. So I'll just say that some knife makers will make exceptions for their friends, and that's why I say foster your relationships. Because if you come across the ability to purchase some interesting material, like I bought some carbo quartz last week, and like Josh was saying, he bought that special Damascus. Sometimes you can offer to these guys to build a knife with that specific material. Not a lot of makers will be open to that. Again, that really hinges on your relationship with those people.
This is a handshake deal industry. Yeah. Get used to it.
It is. It's a lot of backdoors and smoke and mirrors and, handshakes in dark alleys and stuff and late night deals. You just have to figure out a way to make it happen. But with regards to what you were saying, Tyler, in terms of like not being satisfied with the things that you design, definitely another point where you could be in constant communication with the maker and be like, I'm not sure that sounds like a good idea. Maybe we could do it this way. I think it's important to just be in communication with the maker so that if you change your mind, when you can say it and when it would be appropriate, I guess.
Yeah. My problem is that the whole thing is just bad, and I say that it's good until I get it in the mail. But no, but so now that I've kind of like outlined my sort of midlife crisis of
your
like
midlife
I can't
crisis.
Deal with this anymore. My midlife crisis. My midlife crisis. I will just talk about sort of what it's like. If you're not as jaded and paranoid and annoying as me, you might be interested in ordering a custom knife. So ordering a knife can be pleasant and exciting, or a stress-inducing nightmare. And that the stress-inducing nightmare aspect doesn't have to do with any of the picky aspects that I've mentioned previously, but just dealing with a maker ghosting on you, totally being MIA, a maker being just really rude to you, right? Like saying no all the time to all your questions or ignoring you or what have you. It can be very difficult. Or, if a maker promises a knife in a certain amount of time, if you haven't ordered a custom knife yet, you will not get it on time. Like, let's just be real, right? It's very rare that a maker delivers a knife on time. Unless it's like, I'm giving you a year because I'm going to pick it up at the next Blade show kind of thing. They're almost never delivered on time. So just be prepared for that. It takes months for the most part. But so it can be super pleasant because you can work with a maker like the Holtz, right? We've mentioned them before. Absolutely top tier customer service. They are so fun, and they give you just so much. They give you the sense that they're so open to working with you, and if everything is double checked, everything is made certain, everything is done 100 times if it needs to be done 100 times to get it right, and just it's a delightful experience. It's like ordering something that's bespoke, whether you were buying a bespoke watch or a bespoke bicycle or a bespoke Rolls Royce or, a bespoke anything. It's just a delightful experience when the people that you're working with are excellent. Or it can be the worst fucking thing ever. I'm not going to use any examples because it's kind of like rude, I guess, to just call people out. But I've worked with makers who, just like vanish and stuff. I know Josh has had some experiences. I'm sure Frank has.
It does happen.
But it can be really daunting. And I would say that the worst part is when you've given your money to the person and then they start fucking you. That's when things get really not great. So if you've never worked with a specific maker before, and you can't get any references or anything, if they ask for money up front, maybe sort of just talk to them about it. Maybe make sure that they fully understand what your expectations are, so that if they're not met, you can do your best to hold them accountable.
And my policy, I have never had this problem because I've never paid up front. I don't do that. Right. If that's a thing, I walk
exactly.
away.
If it's a reputable, I've actually had a knife maker tell me this. He said, if the guy is a reputable knife maker, he's not going to ask for money up front. And here's another thing, since we're talking about money, most of these transactions do occur through PayPal, and this is a public service announcement. Now listen to me. This is very important. Do not, under any circumstances, pay for a knife through friends and family. They're not your friend. They're not your family. Don't give them friends and family. When you do that, you just burned every bridge that you ever had of getting that money back if something goes wrong. If the person says, I need $700 and send it friends and family, this is what I do every single time. I was like, I don't feel comfortable sending it friends and family, or I might not even tell them that. I'll say, can I send it goods and services, but I will pay the fee. And I use a credit card. I don't even use a debit card. That's how paranoid I am about money. So I have 2 layers of security. I have my credit card company that's going to protect me, and I have PayPal that's going to protect me. If I pay with friends and family, PayPal is going to say fuck off, and my credit card is going to say, well, PayPal said fuck off because you did this way. There's no paper trail anymore. So for the love of God, if somebody asked you for friends and family, either A, walk away, or B, talk them into goods and services. You're buying a good.
Unless they are your friend or your family.
Dude, I wouldn't. If it was my mom, I'd be like, can I send it to you through goods and services?
I think that's Josh's paranoia, not rules that everyone should live by.
I have heard horror story after horror. I can't fucking talk ever.
Horror story?
Horror story.
Horseradish story.
Horror story. I got some ebonics going on here. It's my southern upbringing. I've heard so many stories about how it's like, oh, I sent this maker $500 and they never sent me the knife. It's like, well, did you pay through goods and services? No, I sent it to them friends and family. What the fuck are you doing?
That's a good
Well, there
lesson
you
to
go.
teach people.
That's your
That's good.
Darwinism award right there.
True that.
I never pay up front. I've never been in a situation with a knife maker where they asked me to pay up front. So maybe I've been lucky in that way, but I just, as a policy, I wouldn't do it, and certainly don't pay friends and family.
Yeah, I definitely don't adhere to any of that. Call me reckless because I am.
Sometimes you got to be reckless to get what you want.
I've been burned, dude.
Yeah, but you get burned.
I've been burned.
Yeah.
Something else to be considerate of if you aren't currently participating in the high-end knife market, but you have bought yourself a Zero Tolerance and a Spyderco Paramilitary 2 in the past, surely you're familiar with warranty policies. These are, of course, written by lawyers and posted online for any major knife manufacturer, so it's always quite simple to figure out where you stand with the Microtechs and Benchmades of the world. But should you choose to buy a custom handmade knife from an individual man via PayPal over a social media website, you should consider what would happen if that knife malfunctioned. Some makers are super freaking awesome about it. Thinking Michael Gavick and Natty, the Black Snow Customs, Natty Amore. I'm talking about warranty work and sort of modifications, but warranty work's the thing that you need to be worried about. But it's also interesting to work with makers and have them be willing to make adjustments. Buddy of mine recently picked up the Sabotage number 7. That knife has been 3 whole knives. It's pretty crazy. The first owner bought it and then sent it back for a total redress, and then the next owner sent it back for a second total redress. So the only thing that's sort of the same on the knife is I think just the blade and the liners, which is pretty crazy. But in terms of warranty work, just do your research, ask the maker ahead of time, what happens if something goes wrong? Will you stand by my side or what? And then also there's the question of how long, right? So you've got makers like Frank Fisher, who I know people have sent knives in for small warranty work, and he's had them for 2 years.
I haven't heard about that, yeah.
Which is like, what?
Yep.
So it happens. So just be wary and understand, also if you buy a knife from somebody overseas, I'm huge into South Africans. I absolutely love those guys. I consider them all friends, really. And that's delightful, but I did have an issue with a Harukas Plumeris knife, and even though he's super fucking amazing and is fixing it for free and didn't ask any questions, even though I bought it on the secondary market and was like, I totally want to fix it for you. It's been 6 months, right? I'm picking the knife up at Blade Show, and the way I got it to him was giving it to JD Vandeventer when he was here for Knife Show. So there's that to consider, you know what I mean? The amount of time that you'll be without a knife if you have to send it back. So yeah, that's pretty much everything that I wanted to talk about. I just, if you're going to be moving into the world of buying things that are one-offs and, working with individuals instead of companies that have different departments and everything for customer relations, it's important to know who you're working with and have an established relationship and make sure that you understand what the hell you're signing up for. Josh, talk to us a little, man.
Yeah, that's some really good points. Very, very well stated, my friend. So one of the things I wanted to talk about when we're talking about the high-end market and the custom market is the retailers. People like Recon One, Slice Fine Knives, even Blade HQ has some. Even Blade Gallery is really good for the South African knives, especially Thorburns. Tri-City Customs. It's quite a few out there, right? And one of the things you might ask yourself is, well, why do we have retailers when you can just message the guy on Instagram or you can just get on their books? Well, that's the case, right? But it might be 6 months, a year and a half. Their books might be closed before you can even get on their books, you might have to wait 6 months. So
Sometimes 4, 5, and 9 years.
some people don't. Some people say they have books, but I swear to God, them books never been opened before, and they're live. You know what I'm saying? Like they don't even know what a book looks like. And because these people I've looked at, super high end people, you know, like somebody like Frank Fisher or Stan Wilson. They have. I don't even think he has books at all. But I mean, the point of saying is if you want a knife, you've got to learn how to wait. And if you don't want to wait, they are these retailers who have, you know, collected all these knives, and they're there for people like me who have very impulsive tendencies and that instant gratification. Um, People in my generation, the millennials, were the scourge of the earth, right? They say we're an instant gratification culture because of everything that we grew up
Absolutely.
in. I can say I am. I don't know about everybody else, but that's one of the things. It's like you want that knife, but if I got Thorburn to build me one, how long is that going to take? Oh, maybe a year. Could he even get me on his books? No, but Blade Gallery has one, and that one looks really cool. And hey, look, it's $800. I'm going to buy it, and then tomorrow, 3 days later, I'm going to have it. And that's really where the retailers shine, right? You can find a knife on there that fits the parameters of what you're looking for. It might not be exactly customized, specced out exactly how you want it, but most of the time, if you're looking for a specific knife and you're patient, um, not as patient as you have to be when you're waiting on the books, but if you're patient enough and you're really vetting through all the retailers trying to find that specific version of the model that you want, you can usually do that in like a week. Um, and that's really where they shine. And another thing is, if you can build relationships with these retailers the same way that you do with the makers, they have the purchasing power and the sway that just me or Frankie or Tyler, none of us will be able to convince a maker to get them a knife like they can, because they have that history with them. So you might be able to ask the retailer, hey, you don't have any Pena, you know, modern traditionals. Is there any way you could maybe procure one of those? And I've had this one retailer that told me anytime I wanted one, let them know they're really tight with Pena, and he would get me one, which is really cool because I'm pretty sure if I would ask him, I don't know, 50-50 chance, maybe he will, maybe he won't. And that's really where they shine, man. Just getting you knives when you want them. They might not be exactly what you want. They're like the drug dealers, right? They're the middlemen.
Mm-hmm.
They're the guys that's going to give you your fix right now when you want it. And one of the
We should
biggest
talk about this.
cons that they
Yes.
have.
Yeah.
What, the con? We need to really go into the con. Yeah, it's a big con. Okay, so the retailers, they are businesses. Businesses have to earn money. They have to earn enough money to not only pay for their brick and mortar store if they have one, all the costs associated with running that business, as well as paying their employees, as well as enough a little bit extra to stand as profit. And when you start thinking about that, there's not a lot there, right? So you're going to expect, if you were to get that knife $800 from the maker, you're going to expect to pay $9 to $1,000 for an $800 knife is not the end of the world, because you're paying to get it then, right? But they are some retailers. I'm not going to name names. I'll give you an example. There is a retailer that has a squared A6 knife. A squared is the brand that Andre Van Heerden and Andre Thorburn collaborate together and make these knives. And a standard one runs about $800, give or take. You know, regular materials, nothing fancy, carbon fiber, regular M390 blade. Those are about $800, brand new, from somebody like Knife Gallery or Blade HQ. I bought one from Blade HQ when they went to the New York Custom Knife Show, and that's how much I paid. Well, this website, they're a retailer. They're a very prominent retailer. They have one that is pretty much just like mine, except it has lightning strike carbon fiber, and it's $1,700. That is like $120 120% or 110% markup. They are not only taking, I mean, they're charging more money to sell me that knife than the maker would charge to even make it. That's insane. And that's starting to run rampant, right?
Right. Like way. That's more than double
Yeah.
the price. That's like astronomical.
And you see that a lot, especially like it seems like the higher the knife goes up in price, like the bigger slice of pie they want, which I mean, you start thinking about it from a business perspective. Yeah, they've got a lot of money into it and it's sitting on a shelf for a while. But when you start wanting to ask that much money for a knife, you are just taking an advantage. And that's very ugly. That's super ugly.
I agree.
What do you guys think?
May I just I want to springboard off this and say what I feel is the ugliest thing in the high end knife market. The ugliest thing of all.
You?
Okay. Yes. Oh, Tyler, if I could punch you in the face right now, I would do that. You son of a bitch.
Wow.
Yes. Besides my ugly ass, which I don't show. Yeah, I gotta do a face reveal and just be like,
he hasn't
look
seen
at this
me
handsome
yet.
motherfucker right here. Anyways, it's when a knife maker, a custom knife maker, has some sort of sale or something, and a knife retailer buys it and then marks that shit way up and resells it the next day. That is the ugliest thing in the world to me. And I see it all too often.
That's awful.
They buy direct and then the next day you see it listed on their site for $1,000 more, and it's like, fuck you, man. Like, let somebody buy that knife. Don't fucking do that. That's the lamest thing that anyone could possibly do, and I don't ever get more upset when that happens, because these dealers or these retailers, they will, bid in auctions. They'll win auctions on a knife that's already crazy expensive because it was at auction, and then mark it way the fuck up again. And it's like, man, I'm losing my mind here right now. Somebody who was never going to own or enjoy the knife to begin with just took somebody else's opportunity, and now they're making it even harder to acquire.
Or maker opens up their books and the retailer buys 5 spots or something. I've seen that happen a couple of times.
It does happen.
Yeah. That's just crazy.
And I don't blame the makers in these scenarios, because the makers have got to make money too.
Money.
I don't blame the makers here. That I would do the same thing. Money talks, bullshit walks. It's the same thing. But that is not. That is something that I find truly unacceptable, and I see it all too often.
Yeah, it does. It's a problem too within the market, because then either these knives go up crazy and they just can't afford them and anything when otherwise they could have, or B, that starts affecting that secondary market. And the secondary market is something I kind of want to touch on. I don't want to go into a whole bunch of depth on it, because there's just so many variables to the secondary market, and we could make a whole podcast just about that. But
we probably should.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. But just real quick on the secondary market, these custom knives, like we said, it seems like there's always a higher demand than a supply. And sometimes when that happens when one maker gets really, really hot all of a sudden, like one Instagram dude, like a fancy Instagram dude that has like 100,000 followers, like starts really focusing on one, it starts kind of creating this bubble, is what we call. And next thing you know, this guy's knives is the hottest shit on the market. Everybody wants them. And a knife yesterday that was $800 is now $3,000 or something crazy. The Grimsmos was a perfect example of that. They were selling knives for $600. Everybody got really excited. I think Nick Shabazz was partly at fault for the rise of the secondary market. He was an early adopter. He was an early praiser, and people valued his opinion and really wanted those knives. And we saw the outcome of that. So when you're buying on the secondary market, most of the time you're going to pay more than dealer costs, or maybe not dealer costs. You're going to pay more than maker costs, especially if it's one of those obscure and somewhat popular knives. Going into it, there's very many different ways. Knife Club has a knife swap subreddit, right? That's what they're called, subreddits. I should know this. Yes, subreddits. And on there, you're going to find a lot of just normal knives, but sometimes a gem will pop up. I bought a Recenti Snafu off of it. And then you got places like Blade Forums. You have to be a member, but a little trick, most people say that the messaging system sucks. So you can browse it, and a lot of people post their email, and you can just email them, say, hey, I saw it on Blade Forums. You don't have to pay for that, which if you really like their website, maybe you should to help support them. I don't know. That's up to you. USN, like we said earlier, that's a good place on the secondary
You have
market.
to be. Yeah, I should say you have to be a paid member to post on Blade Forums.
Yes, to post but not buy. Yeah, that's a
Right.
good thing. USN, same way. Do you have to pay on USN? I
USN,
don't.
you have to pay for just to even access the Cove, which is the selling market.
Okay, I don't really go on USN too much.
USN's
so.
the
Yeah,
place
I
to
haven't been on
be,
there.
man.
Yeah, I like it. Their goat's cool.
I feel like that's still like a layer beyond where I am right now. I think that's like even more high end than I could really deal with right now.
Right. Yeah, those guys
It's
always
all the
seem to have
same as
all the cool
Instagram.
stuff.
We're all the same people.
It's
All
true.
the
There's only a handful of us. It's like, a couple thousand people in the whole world doing this.
But I feel like the people that have the USN usernames and then like really prominent on USN, those guys have got like the deepest pockets in the world. That's just my perception of those USN guys.
I would say the most money that I've seen is in Instagram profiles.
Well, they have Instagram profiles too, but if you track the source of the Instagram profile, they originated. Their origin was USN, right?
Some cases.
I mean, we
Yeah,
could start naming
sometimes.
names. Doc Slava, that dude, Micah. I mean, there's a bunch. I don't know. This is just a silly discussion.
Let me give you an old adage that my grandfather told me one time. He was a stockbroker, and he said, "Just because you spend money doesn't mean you have money." So I sometimes
That is
these
very,
guys
very true.
these
But
guys show off really hard, but don't necessarily be envious of their situation.
and you never should be, anyways, right?
Yeah,
I
always.
mean,
Yeah.
these people could be like running up credit cards for all we know. Who knows? Anyways,
I mean, probably not, but you never know.
yeah. Anyways, Instagram is another really good one. There's a knife sell hashtag, which unfortunately everybody seems to love for any post. Like I was browsing through there, and there's
All
just some random
posts.
picture. Yeah, there's this random dude, just a picture of him, and it was knife sell. I felt like messaging was like, hey, what knife are you selling? Just to fuck with him, but I decided not to.
Yeah.
It's because people do copy paste.
That's
They
true.
copied their hashtags, and it's a good hashtag. It brings you a lot of likes and stuff. But
But
it's
if I'm not selling my
people
knife, I'm
abuse
going
it.
to edit it. Yeah, that's just
People
that's
abuse it.
inconsiderate. That's inconsiderate.
It is inconsiderate. Good word.
Cool.
So the guy that can't speak used a good word. Yes.
There you
Anyways, so those are all the places that you can buy a knife on the secondary market. And if it's a popular knife that you're really looking for, you're going to probably pay a little bit more than you would. Another thing is, one of the things I love about Reddit is they require you to post a timestamp with your picture, with your username and the date. I love that. I don't know why other places doesn't. And when I buy a knife, especially when it's a very expensive knife, this just goes back to my paranoia about my money, is if I'm about to buy a $1,500 knife like a Recenti or something, I want that person to prove to me they actually own that knife.
Yeah, and it's
I
in
know.
its as stated condition.
Yes, exactly. So when you're buying a knife on the secondary market, ask questions.
Yeah.
Ask, hey, is there
Now
any
we're going down
issues?
that road though. Now we're getting into that secondary market talk. So maybe we could save that for a totally separate episode, maybe.
Right.
Sure.
But just to finish that little thought I had, if you're going to buy one, ask questions, maybe ask for a timestamp, and for the love of God, pay with goods and services. If they only want to accept friends and family, walk away from the deal, no matter how bad you want the knife.
Fair point.
Cool.
Yeah.
Uh,
We'll save the rest for another time.
So, real quick before we wrap this up, I just wanted to sort of touch on shows. Obviously, Frank brought it up. Blade shows in 3 weeks. We are all very excited, and I think I've said it in other casts and everything. Part of being in the high end market is the enormous expense, right? And everybody can kind of play in a different sized pool. But if really your goal is to sort of nail down what your interests are and to find out what the best knives are and everything, instead of spending $50,000 trying to buy every single knife and get it mailed to your house, spend $1,000 and go to fucking Blade Show or New York Custom Knife Show or The Gathering or anywhere really, and go pick everything up and shake the maker's hands and try all the knives, understand how much variance there is in the market, see knives that you had no freaking clue existed, right? And go up to all the makers who you've sort of been gawking at that have $3,000 and $5,000 and $10,000 knives that you've never quite pulled the trigger on. Pick one up, see if it's worth it. Maybe it sucks. So invest in going in shows. I think that is probably the best way to navigate this market without driving yourself into a deep abyss.
I will be taking you up on that advice and going to my first one coming up here at the Blade Show. It'll be great.
Yeah, me too.
Very exciting. Very exciting.
Yeah, man.
So would you say Blade is a good first show, like for somebody that's wanting to get that experience because of the variety?
So I think Blade is the best first show, and also for me is like a show that like I'm going to Blade this year because it's the right thing to do. Not really because I want to. And what I mean by that is like going to Blade Show is so epic because it's where the most people are at once, both in terms of makers and collectors and YouTubers and everything like that. And so if you sort of like want to go see everything and meet everyone, you got to be at Blade. Now there's a handful of makers that only appear at like The Gathering. So that's another really good show, especially if you're more into customs. Blade is great if you're sort of like in the middle, right? And you're buying $500 to $1,500 knives, but you want to try everything and you still might be interested in looking at the new zero tolerance prototype, right? Last year for me, it was the 0055 that I got to play with before anybody else. That was cool. There's all those reasons. Of course, all the big YouTubers are there. If you want to go meet Epic Snuggle Bunny or Dr. Frunky or Nick Shabazz, if you can listen for his voice.
Snuggle Bunny will be there. Shabazz will not be there. I don't consider myself in the same breath as those guys, but that's cool.
They have pretty big audiences.
He's got personal stuff he's dealing with this year. He's got a job.
He said work.
Yeah. Fair play. But yeah, and you get to meet everybody, and then again, you're going to meet makers. I mean, I met Jason Overall, right, of Larevo Knives. Never heard of him. I sort of had seen a couple pictures on Instagram of his Blade Show lineup, just from like scrolling through discovery feeds. And I was like, oh, that guy's knives look cool. Like, I hope I bump into him. And then I did. And then I bought the most expensive knife I've ever bought at the time from him. And the next more even expensive knife that I bought was one of his knives as well. The Latterus that we spoke about earlier. Yeah. But so yeah, it's really cool. It's quite an adventure. And then after you've sort of done the Blade Show thing, if your goals are more aligned with mine, which would be having in-depth, uninterrupted conversations with makers, and being able to like put your stuff down and like stand still and like talk to somebody, whether you're talking to a collector at a maker's table, hang out with a maker. I was at JD Vandeventer's table at New York Custom Knife Shows, like kind of like my home base, like my now pack was there and like everything, you know what I mean? I was just hanging out. And so for me, that was a lot more pleasurable. And so, yeah, every show has its merits, but I recommend going to something, because it's invaluable to be able to pick up 500 knives in a day.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
That's a really good point. Something I'm looking forward to is just touching every single one. Like you said, I want the most experience. That experience is going to be worth it in the long run, because then I know exactly who to focus on going forward next year.
Absolutely. I went to Blade Show thinking that I was into a bunch of people, and I left thinking I was into a totally different set of people. But yeah, so let's go ahead and wrap this one up. As far as notable news is concerned, obviously we've mentioned it a million times. Blade Show's in 3 weeks. We do expect to have one more episode out right before Blade Show, 2 weeks from the release date of this podcast. And then, of course, the first cast that we do post Blade Show will be about Blade Show. And so we're all very much looking forward to that. Does anybody else have any considerations to be made before we wrap this up?
I need to go watch the Avengers real quick, so yeah, we gotta go.
Fair play.
I'm going in like 20 minutes, so yeah.
Well, I'm good.
Awesome. Well, to all of our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. If you would like to, of course, ask us any questions, we do want to start doing short little listener Q&As at the end of our cast. So please shoot us an email at theknifecast@gmail.com. Guys, go ahead and tell us where we can find you. Frank?
I am Dr. Frunky on Instagram and YouTube. You can send me an email at drfrunky@gmail.com. Easiest to reach on Instagram, I would say.
And Josh?
I am Echo Does Knives on Instagram. There are 2 underscores in that name, and just message me over there and we can have a conversation about knives.
Sweet. And I am... What am I? Tovarish Works. You could find me on YouTube at Tovarish Works. Find me on Instagram at Tovarish Works. And of course, you can email me at tovarishworks@gmail.com. Thanks so much for listening, guys, and we will see you next time.